Welcome to It's an Inside Job, the podcast where we equip you with actionable skills to build resilience, enhance communication, foster well-being, and lead and coach with impact. I'm your host, Jason Lim, and every Monday we bring you expert insights and real-world stories to help you thrive and succeed. And with that said, let's slip into the stream. Well, welcome back to the show. Thank you for joining me for another Monday. Have you ever stopped to ask yourself not just how strong your relationships are, but how resilient they are? Do they have the depth to withstand discomfort, uncertainty, growth, adversity? Or are they built on fragile foundations that crack under pressure? Recently, I just finished the book, 12 Questions for Love, a guide to intimate conversations and deeper relationships. It was a moving book. It's a manifesto. It's a instruction manual, per se, on how to build relationships. And I really wanted the author on the show today to speak to this. Today I'm sitting down with Topaz Adizes. Not only is he an author, but he's also an Emmy Award-winning writer, director, and experienced design architect. Now, he spent over a decade exploring human connection through The Skin Deep, his experienced design studio, where he's filmed over 1,250 conversations between people, diving deep into what strengthens and challenges relationships. He has an enormous body of work, and it's being recognized by Cannes, Sundance, South by Southwest. His writings have also been featured in The New Yorker, Vanity Fair, and The New York Times, and he has earned an Emmy for new approaches to documentary storytelling. Now, Topaz and I unpack some of the most misunderstood aspects of relations today. Why sitting with uncomfortable questions is a sign of resilience, how emotional maturity shapes communication, and the role of self-reflection in making better decisions. We also talk about the power of questions, and actually how to engineer those questions to explore our relationships. Because I think many of us, sometimes when our relationships are okay, they're kind of working, we kind of take them for granted, and we don't spend the time to deeply explore how to enrich, strengthen, and create more resilient and robust relationships. I think you're going to find this conversation enriching, intriguing, and inspiring. So without further ado, let's slip into the stream and meet with Topaz Adizes. Hey, Topaz. Welcome to the show. I was wondering if we could start the conversation by you briefly introducing who you are and what you do.
Yeah, well, who am I, what I do? I was a film director I can always start this. I studied philosophy at UC Berkeley in Oxford. I spent a semester studying in Lund University in Sweden, and then a year and a half working with my good friends in Malmö. So I can speak a little Swedish, and I love Scandinavia. I just love that part of the world and the values and the culture. So I have a close affinity to where you live, even though I'm here in Mexico because my wife is from Mexico. And for the first 20 years of my professional life, I was a film director, both fiction and documentary, just traveling the world and making films, talking to people, interviewing, fiction, doc. And then, I had a short film that went to Cannes. After 2 years in a row, I went to Sundance. The third year, I went to Cannes, and it was, holy shit, I'm a director now. I remember my parents, because they're European, when they realized I went to Cannes, it was like, oh my God, my son's a filmmaker. I was like, yeah, I've been a filmmaker for 15 years. Now I went to Cannes. Now I'm like, so, that was a big deal. And I remember I had a project with a very good friend of mine who had actually died a month before I went to Cannes. He had a film. His name was Tim Heatherton. He was a famous war photographer. And he died in Misrata a month before. We had a project going together. So I kind of had this whole thing lined up. I did what we traditionally supposed to do, which is you make your film, you have a feature script, and you go to the festivals, and then people go, great, you're in Cannes. What's your feature script? And I have this incredible feature script. And basically nothing really happened. And a few months later, by accident, I put the film on Vimeo without a password. This is 2011. So back then you still had the thing about don't put it online before you go to festivals, blah, blah, blah. And I forgot to put it on the password. And a few days later, I get a notification that I have 500,000 views. 500,000 people saw my film. And I thought, wait, what kind of game am I playing right now? Because how much time, money, and energy would it have taken me to get 500,000 people to see my short film in the theaters? Or to even get the 500,000 people to see my feature film in theaters? And look, it just happened in a week. Vimeo picked it up a short of a week and boom, it went. And so it really brought up the question, what game am I playing? At that point, I'd been playing the game of being a film director. I saw film as a modern day meditation. Cinema is modern day meditation. People are in a room. They're focused for 90 minutes. They're not moving. The breathing pattern is consistent. They're looking forward and they're ingesting some kind of idea or movie or storyline. But what about injecting ideas in the mainstream? That's an interesting game to play. And if that's the case, digital media is a much more interesting place to play that. And that started the question and the shift for me into, let me start playing with digital media and creating content. But then the question is, what do I want to share? What ideas do I want to inject into the mainstream? And so that came up with my own personal life where, look, I lived 18 years in New York. Around 35, 36, 37, I'm dating, single in New York. And I have a brother who's 16 years younger than I. And he's also living in New York. And I see how we're dating totally different. Because he grew up 16 years, younger than I, with a totally different relationship to technology. So whereas I, at this time, would want to talk to people, not text them, he was texting left and right, letting updates. I was embarrassed to go on OkCupid and ask for, like my relationship to technology was fundamentally different than his. And we were both relating to our potential partners and relationships romantically in a fundamentally different way. I thought, isn't that amazing? Everyone's talking about how technology is changing financial structures with crypto, how it's changing politics, how social media is changing how we, see the world. And we relate to one another. What about the emotional experience of being human? How is technology shifting the emotional experience of being human? That was a question I was really interested in. So, injecting ideas in the mainstream, what was the idea? Emotional experience. How is it shifting? How is it changing? And so, therefore, I launched the Skin Deep, which is an experience design studio, focused on that question. And I started with just the question. I didn't know what we do. And early on, we started this project where we'd bring two people in a room, we'd face them together, and we offer them questions. And we'd film it with three cameras, a wide shot and two close-ups on their faces. But you'd always see both faces at the same time, whether it's a bipanel or triptych. You'd always see two faces at the same time. And that we called the and, because it illuminated the space between. The and is the relationship. It's not you or I, us or them. It's you and I. It's us and them. It's the and that connects us. It's the and that is the space between. And so for the last 11 years, now we're starting the 12th year, I've been filming over 1,250 pairs who come in and have a conversation, and we film it. And that's been an incredible experience for me. And then obviously, like last year, we released the book, which is Distillation of the Learnings. And last year, I've been doing the podcast and more filmings, and that's kind of my story up to now. That's how I got to here.
Yeah, it's interesting. Just as a side note, I have 3 teenage kids, and one of them asked, "Dad, I really don't know what to do in university." And I said, "You know what? I didn't really figure it out." And what I hear from you, your experience of traipsing through life, it was kind of serendipitous here. It was a chance here, a possibility here. Well, one thing led to another. And sometimes, as I tell my kids, and that it sounds like you have this, Topaz, your own experience, that you never know when, a dog leg comes into life and then you go down that alley and it opens a whole different world in the sense of what brought you to this space now. Anyways, that's just a side issue. But what I really wanted to have you on, a former guest, Dr. Gary Krotas, recommended you because on the show, I like to talk about resilience, and resilience is a really broad topic. It has a lot of altitude and latitude to talk about it. And when you were generous enough to send me your book, I read through it and I saw you had these QR codes that take you to these different films of these couples and such. 12 Questions of Love, sorry. That was the book. It really kind of inspired me because what we talk about a lot is sort of individual resilience, but at a private and professional level, we're talking about relationships. How do we create resilient, robust relationships? And what your book really spoke to me, and it resonated because my background's in clinical psychology and the cognitive sciences and working with individuals and such. That was before. Now I work more in the corporate space. But that's kind of what I wanted to explore with you today. We are all in relationships. Some we would characterize as very healthy and deep and functional. And then we have others that are sort of superficial and dysfunctional, whatever adjective we want to add to it, however we want to qualify it. What do you think you did 1,250 of these, a filming of couples. What do you think are some
of pairs? Because it's not just couples like romantic, it's fathers and sons, best friends.
My bad.
So
Sorry.
Every kind of relationship. Yeah. Just clarify, because it's a whole spectrum of relationships we filmed.
Which is even more dynamic. But what do you think? What do you believe, or from your experience, is the most misunderstood aspect we have of relationships?
Well, okay. In terms of resilience, and you're gonna love this.
Okay.
I hope. But it's super simple. Here it goes. It's not about the answers. It's about your ability to sit in the discomfort of the questions. It's not about the answers. Can you sit in the discomfort of the questions? Whether it's your colleague at work, whether it's your best friend, whether it's your parent, your son, or your partner, your spouse. Can you sit there and ask a challenging question? You don't need to answer it, but can you sit in the discomfort of the question? That, to me, is an indication of the resilience of your relationship. Before you even get to the answer, because in our society, Western society specifically, we are so focused on the answer. It's all about the answer. But the truth is, in my opinion, from doing this for the last 11 years, I've seen that the question is the answer. The answer is not the answer. The question is the answer. And a sign of resilience is your ability to sit in the discomfort of the question. Because, and just to be clear, discomfort and safety are two different things. They're not the same thing. And that should not be confounded. You want to be safe and you want to be uncomfortable. Because if you're uncomfortable, that means you're growing, you're stretching. If you're comfortable, great, but you're not growing per se, right? You want to be safe, but you want to be uncomfortable. In the sense of, if you want to grow the relationship, if you want to grow individually. And the ability to be resilient is the fact that you can sit in the discomfort and have the faith and understanding and the trust that, hey, we'll figure this out. But we can we can weather the storm.
Yeah, 2 points to that. The brain loves to surf between the sense of certainty and uncertainty. If there's too much certainty, then we take everything for routines and patterns. But uncertainty, a level of that, means growth and evolution, a development, a learning process. And what I hear is just that. That's where the brain, that's its happy place between the certainty and uncertainty. 1 foot in safety and 1 foot just a little outside into the wilderness there. And I like the way how you said that, the distinction or the delineation between safety and discomfort. But my question is, that would take that relationship, that pair, father, son, daughter, mother, whatever, romantic couple, what have you, that would say they have to be at a certain maturity level to actually ask those questions. But if you look at a lot of relationships, sometimes when they go south or they get derailed, they never actually get to that stage. I mean, how do couples move from that stage where it's just like, forget it, there's no point. It's no communications, no one's listening, or whatever the standard saw is. But the question is, from your experience, Topaz, how can they move across that threshold where they can actually start to ask those deep, well-engineered questions to sit in that discomfort?
Yeah, good question. What comes up for me is the word leverage. Leverage. If you don't have the leverage, you don't make the action. And that leverage could be probably in 2 forms. One form is you don't want to have this conversation because the discomfort is so much that you don't want to have it. But if you realize that if we don't have it now, the pain we're going to have in the future is going to be so much worse. We might as well have it now. It's almost like the dentist. Like you want to postpone the dentist because it hurts a little now, but if you postpone for too long, the pain will be so bad that you're gonna have to go in there for a 2-hour surgery. So you might as well deal with the like 20-minute now than the 2 hours in 2 years. If you know that, that creates leverage. The flip side is leverage is also on the idea of payoff. Like, okay, it might be a little uncomfortable. What if I know that the sense of fulfillment, the sense of accomplishment, once we get to the other side is gonna be so great, it's worth it. Now, if you look at your life, if to the listener right now, and Jason, for yourself too, all of us, if I ask you, like, point to me a moment of great achievement when you are super proud, whether it's of your relationship, whether it's something at work, you got an award, anything, just a moment with your child, someone, a colleague at work, tell me a moment where you feel you really accomplished, like, boom, that was great. I did that. That was awesome. Okay, think about that moment. I guarantee you that whether it was 5 minutes before that moment or a month before that moment, you were shitting a brick. You were anxious about something because that moment, that the sense of accomplishment is inversely related to the challenge that's offered in order to achieve it. You don't just have a moment where you go, that's amazing. You didn't really like work for it or face some kind of consternation. So that's what I mean by the payoff. If you look, that's how the system, in my opinion, works. Most payoffs come because you're overcoming some kind of challenge, some kind of, okay, you gave a great speech. Well, before that, you were fearful of speaking in front of people, but you worked at it. You didn't make a marketing presentation at work. You weren't sure. You did the analysis. You practiced. You were anxious. You're nervous. You did it. You crushed it. Your colleagues were like, wow, that was inspiring. Thank you. You were worried. Every time there's something, does that resonate for you? Do you believe that? Or how does that land for you? Do you think that's true?
For me, when I used to work with trauma way back in the day, it wasn't always capital T trauma. So it does resonate for me, just from my own sort of experience, that we have to come to a certain place. We have to come to a certain, not maybe maturity, but we have to come to a certain perspective. We have to reach that before we can actually even have that conversation. And I think that is going through the gauntlet. And that's not always easy to get to that place from my perspective, to get to that's.
Yeah. But I guess the thing is you need leverage to want to go to that place, because I mean, I have, look, I have family members who are very comfortable and don't want to be uncomfortable. And when I ask the questions, I'm the black sheep and I get pushed out, which is fair enough. But to me, they're staying in the comfort, which is only leading to future pain. Because at some point, life is going to throw something at you where you have to deal with it and you have to talk about it. And if you're not stretched, it's like, look, if I don't exercise every day, fair enough. But at some point, when I need to go for a jog, I'm going to pull a hamstring. I'm not just going to climb Kilimanjaro today. I can't do it today. I'm going to get injured. I won't make it. I need to stretch. I need to practice. I need to prepare. So, and life throws challenges your way all the time. How resilient are you? How capable are you to weather that storm? You need to be practiced. You need to be in good shape. So are we practicing the communication tools in our relationship, the emotional ability to sit in discomfort and to practice that, and to also not only practice what I call emotional articulation, which is putting words to your emotions and articulating them, but also holding the space for the discomfort. Being practiced at holding the space of like, okay, we're going to sit here and we know we don't have to get to the answer right now, but we could sit there and ask it, come back to it in a week, come back to it in an hour, sit with it. How much are we practicing? Because then at some point, something's going to happen in your life where you're going to really have to overcome that challenge. And how prepared are you for that in your relationships? Whether it's at work, whether it's, what comes up?
No, I think that's really when you said, sit with the emotions, because a lot of us characterize emotions as either good or bad. But for me, from what I've learned, through my education and my experience, is that emotions are not good or bad. They're either uncomfortable or very comfortable. There's a valence. And all emotions are sort of chemical messengers from physiology to psychology to give us something, because it doesn't have grammar, it doesn't have syntax. But then there's also intensity of those emotions. And as you said, with the analogy of the dentist, it's better to go when you have a small cavity and maybe it's just a quick drilling and filling, instead of something, where your teeth are rotting and then they're falling out. It's just that emotions are, you said it's such a salient point. It's sitting with emotions and understanding what is that emotion trying to communicate with me or to me, sorry.
Yeah, and that speaks to deep listening for me, which is sitting with your emotion and feeling that and engaging in that space versus coming from the mind. Because the mind is built to protect you, and it does a great job at that. But the heart is built to connect you, and it does a great job at that. But then which one where am I speaking from? Oftentimes when we're in conversation, we speak from the place of the mind. Someone is speaking and you're listening, and actually what you're doing is you're thinking about your own response. Okay, so they're talking. So I'm going to respond. Why? Because I want to look like I'm smart. I want them to feel like I really understand what they're saying. I want them to end up in the same conclusion I have, whatever it is. You're thinking about the response instead of go to your body. And your body is the holder of the emotions. Feel it and speak from that place. You will have a different conversation. You have a conversation that is more emotionally engaging, that's more speaking from the heart, that more connects you to the other person than when you're speaking from the head. And and just going back to the dentist analogy, which I really like because first time using that. But the other part too is like, look, we brush our teeth every day. In theory, we floss every day. So we don't have to have the cavity, right? Are we doing that in our relationships? Every day, you're morning and night, you brush your teeth and you floss. You're maintaining your teeth. Do you maintain your relationships? You might be exercising, stretching every day. Do you maintain your relationships? Well, yes, no. Well, how do you do that? And that's the key. What I've learned from this last year, not just writing the book, what I've learned for the last year of doing 100 podcasts, because you see what sticks. You're in conversation with people like you. It's amazing, right? I love it. This to me is going to amp my day up. But do people learn how to actually have constructive conversations that explore the relationship? We don't learn that. We don't learn how to hold the space, and we don't learn how to construct well-constructed questions. We model it. We model it from our families and maybe our friend groups, maybe in the culture in the company. And you don't know if that modeling is good or bad. And what I've been fortunate enough to see is how to construct it yourselves and learn it. That's what's been amazing me for how do you create the space and how do you construct, well-constructed questions? You do those two things, you can have incredible conversations, exploratory conversations that will be different than anything you had before. And through that exploration of your relationship, it will make your relationship more resilient because you've had the ability to sit in the discomfort of the questions. You've been able to emotionally articulate things that you haven't before, that make you realize certain things, that reaffirm you're connected to the other person. Or even more interestingly, is that through the conversation, you actually get a greater sense of who you are through the reflection of the other person.
Well said. That's a very astute point. So before we explore the conversation with that other person, for me, having that difficult conversation, that's the secondary conversation. I think the primary conversation is one we have with ourselves. If someone's struggling with a relationship right now and they're thinking, they're wondering, should I stay in this relation or walk away? And that primary conversation they have with themselves, from your experience, Topaz, what do you think should be some of the questions they should be asking themselves before making such a decision?
Great question. Are you ready for this? I think this is incredibly helpful. If I can look, because I actually had a friend of mine call me a month ago and asked me this question. And it's like, how you're that friend, you're like, everyone has that friend in the friend group. You have the friend that you go to drink with. You have the friend you go on adventures with. You have the friend you might exercise with or meditate. I seem to be the guy that people call for advice, And recently, my advice in the last few years has gotten so much better. Why? Because I'm not giving advice. My advice is ask a better question. And so when someone says, should I break up or not? I'm like, here it is. Listen to your audience. Listen right now. If you find yourself asking a hard question that you banging your head against the wall because you can't figure out the answer, where should we live? Should I break up? Should I quit the job? Should I start this company? And you're banging your head, whatever the question is, and you can't figure it out and you're going in circles, circles, stop and ask another question. You have to ask another question, a better question. And this is how you do it. So if we're doing the example of should I break up or not? Okay, stop. And you're like, I don't know. Okay, stop. First, you're going to create 30 to 50 questions. And this is how you create the question. First, you have 3 blanks that you're going to fill. One is time frame. One is how it makes you feel. And the other one is how it affects or serves others. So for example, it'd be like, what can I do for the next 6 weeks that, now you're going, how it makes you feel, that inspires me. Now you go to the last one, how it affects others, such that I can support others that I love. Okay, another question. What can I do for the next 3 years that will challenge me on the level of personal intimacy, such that I'm in a position to start my own family? Right? You create 30 to 50 of these questions, and you have each question has 3 kind of things you need to fill in: time frame, how it makes you feel, and how it affects or serves others. Okay, and we can talk about why those are the 3 things, but you create 30 to 50 of those. Then you circle, then you look at it, and you ponder on the question, and you're like, which is the question I want to answer? Which is the question that gives me energy? You circle it. Then the answer, whether you should be in this relationship or not, becomes obvious and simple. So if the question is, if it's like personal, what can I do for the next 6 weeks, 2 months, a year, so that I challenge myself on personal intimacy, such that I prepare for family? Okay, if that's the question, is the relationship I'm currently in serving that question? And you'll know, yes, no, done. Right? If the thing is, what can I do to go, what can I do for the next year so that I can explore the world and whatever it is, explore the world such that I can find a deeper understanding of how I can serve others or my community or my family. And you circle that. Then should you stay in the relationship or not? So when you're banging your head around a wall, find a better question. You find a better question, you construct them, time frame, how it makes you feel, how it affects others and serves others. You fill that out, you create 30 to 50 of them, you look at it, and you say, which one do I want to answer? And you circle the one you want to answer. And then you apply the first question, and it becomes obvious.
Topaz's work has given him a unique lens on how we connect, communicate, and navigate emotional complexity in our relationships. One of the central themes we discussed was the resilience in relationships, and that's the ability to sit with uncertainty, to ask difficult questions, and to embrace discomfort as a path towards building more robust relationships. Topaz highlighted how true resilience isn't about quick answers, but rather about being comfortable with not knowing. I completely agree. Our brains thrive on balancing certainty and uncertainty. Maturity, we agreed, well, that comes from being willing to wrestle with tough questions rather than seeking immediate clarity. We also explored emotional maturity and communication, emphasizing that maintaining relationships requires ongoing effort, action, much like maintaining our physical health. Topaz, he compared it to dental hygiene, small, consistent practice that lead to long-term well-being. One of his key insights was the importance of self-reflection before making major relationship decisions. So instead of focusing solely on whether a relationship works, we should ask ourselves, am I ready for the challenges that come with it? Now, another intriguing topic that we explored was how we frame decisions through the questions we ask. Topaz shared a structured way to navigate big decisions. He said setting a time frame, consider how a choice will make us feel, and how it might impact others. We also discussed the importance of open-ended questions over binary ones. Too often, we try to force a decision into a yes or no kind of framework, this binary on and off, when in reality, the best answers usually come from allowing space for deeper exploration. In a sense, who we are and the quality of our lives, well, it comes down to the quality of our relationships. So now, let's slip into part 2 with my fascinating conversation with Topaz. What you've just given is a sort of the combination, the tool, the nuts and bolts to engineer a question. So can we reverse engineer each of those? So there's time frame, how it makes you feel, and how it affects or serves others. Serves others. So time frame. I mean, can we get a little more specific? Are you looking at sort of 24 months, 36 months, a decade into the future? I mean, what's realistic?
Whatever you choose. The point is it has to have a time frame. Because when you say, where should I live? Well, I mean, you and I both know where I live when in my teens is different when I live when in my 20s, different when I live when I have children that are 4 or 5, than living when I have children that are in their teens, that are different when I'm an empty nester. Where should I live? I mean, life is changing all the time. You're changing. And if you don't put a time frame, then your subconscious is like, this is forever. Time frame is essential because the nature of life is it's always changing. And if we don't put the boundaries and the constraints around time frame, we don't know what we're talking about, because forever is forever, but yet there are so many different versions of us in that forever. So we need to give it a time frame. And you could choose it. You could say 10 years, fine. You could choose a month, you could choose a week, you could choose 6 weeks, you could choose chapter. But there has to be you have to be aware that there's an end, start and end point, because you're going to transform. And if you don't acknowledge that,
life, right?
Chapters in life, if you don't acknowledge that, it makes it impossible to find the right answer, because inevitably there'll be multiple answers for that question if there's no time frame, because there's different chapters of you, there's different versions of you. So you have to give it a time frame. It helps constrain and bring more narrow focus what the need is now.
If someone's thinking, okay, I'm with Jason right now, or I'm with Jane right now, can I see myself 2 years in the future with him or her? You know, is that kind of a time frame, or is that just one element of that question? And we have to add the other elements, such as, how is it going to make me feel?
Well, that's why the second one is you have to fill in how it makes you feel. That you have to put in time frame, and then it has to make. Then the second time is, how does it make you feel? And also, I wouldn't start a question with can, is, are, do, would, or have, because if you start any question with those words, you're getting a binary response, which is left or right. Sometimes you need a yes or a no, a binary response, left or right, good or bad. But oftentimes life is not binary, it's nuanced. So if you start the question with what, why, how, you're already shaping a response that is nuanced. It requires you to answer in a way that's non-binary. But to your point, I think it's, even if you do, can I stay with Jason for the next 3 months and it makes me feel this way? You have to put in the way it makes you feel, because that is connected. That is the state that you want to be in, or the state that you want to challenge yourself, whatever it is. But it's like, how's this affecting me? And then the third part is how it serves others, because we are network organisms, and regardless whether you're a narcissist or not, you still get energy from other people. So it makes it more resilient and sustainable when you take into account how it affects or serves other people. And that makes it more sustainable, more resilient. So it affects me, but how is it serving or affecting others? To what end? Right?
So to play the devil's advocate here when it comes to the emotions, because if someone is at this point where they're having a conversation, not should they stay or should it go, but entering the 3 points, having an open-ended question. So it's not binary. But right now, subjectively, they're in some sort of emotional storm. And sometimes where, this, Topaz, but just to articulate it, when we are in an emotional storm, we can see that, we just see that that's continuing. We sometimes forget that it is only temporary, that this too shall pass. But when they're thinking about the second element of engineering questions about emotion, is it how I want to feel with Jason 2 years into the future? Like, is it quite difficult for someone to move from that subjective to a more objective emotional state they want to arrive in, say, 24 months with a particular individual?
Great question. I don't know. What do you I don't know. That's a good question. What comes up for me is, even though you might not feel it now, if that's what you want to feel in the future, you need to take actions and do practices and habits to put yourself in a position to feel that. So asking the question can lead you to an answer that puts you in a position to have that. So if you're in depression right now, and I've been there, where it's hard to get out of bed for me. I mean, I always know when I'm having a hard time, and what helps me is, like, I get in the shower and I can sit all the way down at the bottom of the shower and I look up at the shower head, and it's so far away, and seeing the water just shower down. So I found comforting, and I've been in that place and a few times, but when I'm in that place, it's like I have to ask a different question. Because maybe I'm asking myself, why am I so sad? And if you ask yourself, why am I so sad? Your mind, the faithful servant, it's like a faithful dog. It will run out and find all the sticks to give you an answer why you're so sad. But every stick that comes back, every answer you get, what can you do with those sticks? What can you do with those answers? Instead, if you change the question, if you throw the stick to a different area, they'll come back with different answers, such as the challenges that I currently feel. What are they teaching me? How is this challenge that I'm going through now preparing me for a future version of myself? What is the precipice I'm currently passing over in preparation for what version of myself? What am I learning through this experience that makes me more resilient? Those answers come back are more constructive. And with that, you can work with. And so I find that when we are always answering questions, we're not aware of the questions we're asking. And so bringing more conscientious to the questions shapes the answer. And that's why I think that would be helpful in terms of when we're in a challenging position. And that's why I say create a new question.
I think it's just that, because what I hear is you will want to be sort of present, sort of have a little more self-awareness and be cognizant of how you engineer the questions. Because what came to mind, just to riff on what you're saying.
Yeah, please.
These three different elements of time frame, how do I want to feel, how does it affect or serve others? These, one thing is coming up with the 30, 50 questions, sort of divergent thinking. So you have a choice to which question you want to answer. But each of those time elements also, to help sort of self-exploration, they could actually be sort of prompts or journal entries, like just journaling the idea, okay, what time frame? I'm thinking 24 months. Well, why 24 months? Why? You know what I'm saying? You can almost do an exploratory, a journal in each of these things to help you engineer those 30 to 50 questions, because then you understand maybe the DNA of each of those elements. Again, I'm just spitballing here.
Totally. And the flip side too is maybe you just do brainstorm 50 of them, and then you start looking at the ones that attract you. Why are these attracting me? Because they're all short term, or because they're all long term, or because all of the personal feelings about challenge and discomfort versus safety and like this, or I want adventure now, not in, so you could ask yourself that, because here's the thing. We are always answering questions, but we're not always creating the questions. Sometimes we take other people's questions. We take our parents' questions. We take society's questions. We take the culture's questions. How many entrepreneurs do you talk to who are like, I want to create a unicorn? How many activists you talk to or philanthropists, I want to affect billion people's lives, and it becomes a cliche. You're like, why is that? Because they're just taking on the culture's questions. Why do you want to have a company that affects that is a unicorn? Why do you want to affect a billion people's lives? Why not just affect one person's life profoundly, starting with your own? What are the questions we're asking? Well, usually we take questions. I mean, I knew until I was 37, I was answering my father's question, which is, how do you prove you're a genius to others? That's a high bar to set. Until I was 37, I was chasing that question. And it took me a few years to shed that question, right? What are the questions you're answering? Are you creating your own question? And once you do, you're creating your own life that's unique to you. And that's where you become more empowered in the creation of your own identity, really, and your own actions. I just think it's often overskipped, is the power of the question. We're always so pursued on the answer that oftentimes we're answering the questions that we're given that we've adopted from other people or other points of view.
I mean, it's a simple idea with a deep eloquence, because for me, what you've just said is one of the foundational things to help us shift mindsets. We're always talking about paradigm shifts and mindsets, but if you actually look at the nuts and bolts of what a mindset is, it's this human operating system from head to heart to hand. What we think, what we consistently think, or the pattern of thinking will trigger certain emotions. And emotions are just that. Emotion, sort of evoke motion. We either move away from something or we approach something, which then hand is the behavior. It's the doing, the action, or the inaction or indecision. And for me, what you've just said is to become cognizant. It's not always searching for the answer, but maybe we have to start from the blueprint of, I just dated myself, but started from the design of designing the question, a well-formed question. And you've given us sort of the DNA from years of experience working with this of how we can have that first primary conversation with ourselves before we go into a difficult conversation with someone else. Because sometimes we need to clarify things for ourselves, right? So it's the
100%.
understanding the narrative, the story, the question we're asking ourselves. At least that's what I'm pulling from what you've just
100%. 100%. The question is the answer. That's the next book. The question is the answer.
Yeah.
The answer is the question. And why? I mean, I'm wondering, why are we not taught how to ask really quality questions? Because maybe that's not what people want. People want applying critical thinking to someone else's question. But what really the power is in the question. Another format that's really helpful is called question loops, right? So if you're having a challenging situation and you just don't know, you're trying to figure it out, you're journaling about something, you're exploring something. What's really helpful is sometimes to do a question loop. And the most famous question loop is why. And just keep asking why. Okay, why should I break up? Well, because why that? Why that? Why that? And you just do why to whatever, and you just go deeper. Okay, but here's another one. You go, why? What would that give me? What if I already have it? Why? What would that give me? What if I already have it? Do that loop. You know, I want to sell $1 billion company. Or why? Because this would sense the financial. What if you already have it? Well, I mean, if I already had it, I would do this and that. Okay, sorry, what would it give you? Well, it would give me this. What if you already have that? You know, how often is it like, you know, you say you want to make a lot of money so you have free time. You can spend it with your kids. But right now, you have time to spend with your kids because you're not working, 80 hours a week. So you already have it. Right? Sometimes the thing we're searching for, we already have, we just don't acknowledge it. So just saying that's a help. Question loops are super helpful in terms of peeling the onion and finding where's the source and what are all the different nuances that are involved with the processing that we're in.
I've heard of question loops before in the sense of why, and then up, what. But I really like those two other questions that you've added. You wrote a brilliant book on just exact 12 questions for love. And I went through it. And as I said, there are QR codes where you can go in and you can watch a film on your smartphone, your pad and such, and see these these pairs talking about their relationship. I'm not going to go through all the questions, but yeah, there's some questions here. What are you hesitant to ask me and why? What is the biggest challenge in our relationship right now, and what do you think it is teaching us? Now, I went through all these, and when just before recording, I told you one of them really struck me deep, and it was just in a certain period when and it was this question: if this was our last conversation, what would you never want me to forget? Now, the reason I talk about this, because I was diagnosed with cancer about 12, 13 months ago. And, when you get such a diagnosis, you're thinking, okay, there's an end loop. There's an end game. This circle will come to an end at some point. And, I have a very rich and deep and healthy relationship with my wife of 30 years. And this really struck me. My question to you is how, with your own relationship or relationships, was there when you came up with this question, I guess it's multiple questions about this question, but how did you come up with this question? First of all, what triggered this insight?
Because you never know when the end's going to come.
But was it an experience you had? Was it through a conversation?
Oh, yeah. Well, okay, so there is a doctor who passed from cancer named Dr. David Servan Schreiber. He wrote a book called Anti-Cancer. It's a New York Times bestseller. And the thesis is that we all have cancer cells, all of us, but we also have anti-cancer cells. So the question is, how do you change the terrain of your body to to support the anti-cancer cells and not support the cancer cells, such as, less glucose because of inflammation and, and the foods you eat and the emotional well-being you have. And this was a gentleman who, at 33 was like head of psychological neuroscience or something at the University of Pittsburgh. And he was a hot shot and And he went in, they were doing a test, MRI scan of the brain. And he went in because the person didn't show up. So he kind of filled in the gap for this. They were, doing a large testing. He just filled in the gap, and his colleague said, "Oh my God, you have some crazy cancer. I don't know what it is, but it's in the brain." And he's like, "Okay." So he went down that path, and he did everything. The doctor did everything, and when he was done, he asked the doctor, "What do we do next?" "Oh, we'll just check your T cell count or whatever it is, your blood cell count every 6 months, and PSA. I'm not sure what it is, but he said we'll just check you every 6 months." He's like, "No, but is there nothing I can do to proactively, treat this and handle this?" And they go, no, just. So he spent the remaining, 18 years of his life researching. He wrote the book Anti-Cancer. I was making a filming the film called The C Word. You could see it online. I was director of photography, so I spent time with David. And when I first filmed him, he was trying to get headaches. And little did we know, that was the beginning of the last year of his life because the cancer had returned. And a year later, he passed. And I was there towards the end when he was passing and filming him when he was with his family in basically hospice. And he wrote a book basically by whispering. It's called The Last Goodbye. Or is it called The Last Goodbye or something like? The point is you can say goodbye many times over. You can say, I love you many times over. And that's what informed me of that experience, which was you never know when the end can come. And it doesn't mean you have to wait till the end to say the end. You can say the end many times over. And that's what I learned from him in his book. And that's why I think it's important to have these conversations and to ask and to acknowledge the temporal nature of our lives. And that instead of, it's not going to be served up at a platter all the time at the end. So let's create the platter now and eat from that dish of what is the one thing I'm going to tell you. And I could tell that to you now. I could tell that to you in a week. I could tell that to you in a year. And it doesn't have to be the same thing every time. But I think it's important to acknowledge the temporal nature of our relation, of the human experience and how our relationships are fundamental to that human experience.
Yeah,
I came up with that question.
For me, that question, it's a single question, but before I read the book, I had multiple conversations, right? Because when you get such a diagnosis, things are going in the direction where I want it to go, right? Things are stabilizing. It's but when you first get that news, it's like, okay, you're thinking death sentence. Okay, I got to get my life in order. I mean, your brain goes there.
Yeah,
and with all the training I have, right? But it's something I'm dealing with, I'm living with. It doesn't really impede my life per se. And I'm very lucky in that sense.
How are you doing with it?
Sorry?
How are you doing with it? How are you doing?
I'm in my head, I've already made, this sounds maybe a little trite, but I've already made peace with death in that sense. But I find it hard to make peace with saying bye to my kids and my wife. But that's more doomsday thinking. I'm far from that. I'm very lucky that it's a very slow growing cancer.
Can I just point that out for a sec? Which I think is beautiful. What you just said. You said, I've come to terms with death, meaning your own body leaving, but I have a much harder time coming to terms with saying goodbye to my wife and my kids. So what's more important, and I think this is true for all of us, is not necessarily dying. It's saying goodbye to our relationships.
For sure.
And so to the listener, hopefully, which I think I just want to point it out because it's the threads that bind us that we cherish. It's not necessarily our own living that of ourselves and our own. It's our connections that we cherish. And so, how much are we nurturing those connections?
I think it's such a astute point. For me, the quality of life comes down to the quality of the relations you have. I mean, you could be healthy, but if you're lonely and, in a sea of people in a whatever city, but you feel alone, I mean, I don't think any of us are wired for that. I mean, there may be a few people that are wired for that. But I mean, the majority, without talking about outliers, the quality of lives of, I think, comes down to the quality of the relationships. I don't have a lot of friends. I have a handful of really close friends, and I know they have my six. I know they will be there for me. They are there for me, my wife, my kids. And that's the hardest thing, right? But
Yeah.
that's where the mind goes when you get such a diagnosis. I mean, I could live decades with this. I don't know.
Yeah.
Right? I don't know. Or I could be gone in 6 months. I don't know.
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
How do you feel? How have you noticed it's changed you, like your being, your identity, not your body per se, but like have you noticed a change in how is it changed anything in you?
Generally, we all know that, none of us get out of this game alive, right? But when you get a diagnosis, it's like smack in your face. I mean, it's right there, full and present, and there's no escaping it. With a lot of the times when you're healthy, you can push it aside, right? You can avoid that storm for now, but this storm is raging around me, right? And what it has done is it has forced me to find equanimity. And I've pulled into the eye of the storm because I can't escape the storm. Maybe I can escape it at some point, but right now, no. So I pull into the eye of the storm where there is a certain calm, a collectedness. The best word I can find is equanimity for this. And I'm at peace with it. I'm at peace with it. The diagnosis at first, obviously, it sounds like bad news, but shit happens sometimes, and it's neither good nor bad. What I've framed it's been a wake up call for me to really appreciate the most important things in my life. I mean, again, this might sound trite, but when you're faced with, the Grim Reaper right in your face, and he's got his sickle there, and he may not be swinging it now, but I know at some point he'll be swinging it to harvest. But right now, that's what it's done. It's taught me to find that sort of the stability, that inner resilience, I can call it. And that's why I enjoy doing this podcast, man, because I don't earn money from this. But I just have these rich, deep, exploratory conversations on something that really means a lot to me, resilience.
Well, that to me, that sounds like and I've thought of that before, but what you said of there's a storm swirling around you, and I step into the eye of the storm to find this kind of peace amidst it. That sounds to me like a possible definition of resilience. When shit hits this fan and things are going, and you're in the storm, find the eye of the storm and still operate from that space amidst the storm. That sounds to me like a form of resilience, like a way to be resilient.
Yeah, it's a metaphor that really works for me, and physiologically, cognitively, emotionally, it really resounds with me. It really resonates with me, and I do find calm. Right? I mean, don't get me wrong. I've had my dark and depressing days. I've fallen down that rabbit hole, but I've managed to claw myself out of that rabbit hole. And sometimes I slide back in, but it's easier to claw myself back out, right? So I'm standing on top. And again, it comes back to the crux of this conversation is about relationships, but I think it's also relationships with ourselves. A lot of the questions you've articulated in your book, I can turn those questions back on myself. And these could be, I don't do a lot of journaling, but I do journaling when I feel it's needed. But these questions of, like, what are you hesitant to ask me? What am I hesitant to ask myself, and why, right? I just changed the pronouns a little, right? I think they're really good questions to answer.
Yeah, no, 100%. 100%. Maybe that's, I had 4 friends diagnosed with cancer in the last year, and 2 of them did pass. And it's interesting. And my wife's best friend last year, I don't know if that's helpful I'm sorry if that's not good information to share with you, but I guess the point is that I think that everyone reacts differently to that diagnosis. Like I haven't seen one. People react differently. And it's interesting to see that. Like there's similar common threads, but it's also different. I'm glad that you're trending upward.
Yeah, thanks, man. It's, I think a lot has to do with also mindset, right?
Sure.
But we don't need to go into the depth of that. But,
Yeah.
that's what I found. But I'm just wary of the time. We're coming to the top of the hour. You've been very generous. Topaz, if you, of all these films you've done with these pairs and such, if you had to leave an idea or a food for thought for our listeners today when it comes to building deeper, functional, healthier relationships, what advice or suggestions would you have for them? Or would you like to share with them?
Well, what comes up for me now is something I haven't shared before, but I would say slow down in discomfort and speed up through comfort. That's what
Well
comes up.
said.
Like I think we do the opposite. When we're uncomfortable, we speed up. When we're comfortable, we slow down.
Hmm.
I would slow down in the discomfort and I'd speed up through comfort. Well, maybe not necessarily speed up through comfort, but don't become apathetic in the comfort. Search the safe spaces to be uncomfortable because we are temporal. And how are we growing? How are we utilizing this opportunity of living to be expansive? Whether it's expansive in your actual experience, physical experience, or in your emotional experience, or in the way you articulate with the relationships in your life. How much are you really drinking from that cup of life? That's what I would say.
Thank you, Topaz. It's been a blast. I've learned a lot, and it's you've added depth and eloquence to a lot of these conversations. Because we all go at some point have a rocky relationship, and sometimes it's good to actually have a well thought out manual based on experience and knowledge to help us through that. As you said, we get in relationships, but there's no manual. But in a sense, your book and your work is that manual.
Thank you. I'm glad it's of use, utility. That means a lot. That's what its function is.
So thank you.
Thanks
Topaz,
for having me, Jason. Thank you for the time, the space. I appreciate it.
One of the major things I took away from this conversation with Topaz was reflecting on just how essential, how critical the questions we ask are. It's not always just the answer, but the quality of any answer is going to be dependent upon the quality of the question. The depth and the insight and the eloquence of any answer, again, well, that's triggered by the quality of how we ask questions. Topaz also introduced the idea of question loops, a way to dig deeper into our understanding rather than just responding to the questions imposed by others or by society. We also touched on something deeply personal for me, the fleeting nature of life and the significance of relationships. My own experience with illness, it has reinforced just how vital it is to nurture the connections that truly matter. Resilience, as we've discussed, isn't about avoiding the storm. It's about finding your own center within it. And often the relationships we build are what anchor us in that process. It's the relationships that can help us through turbulence, through adversity, through uncertainty. Maybe some of you listeners out there are not facing illness, but maybe your relationship, whether it's a friend, a lover, a colleague, is rocky, and it's unstable, and it's fractious. And maybe upon reflection, you're thinking, I do want to save this relationship. Then I would highly recommend you picking up Topaz's book, 12 Questions for Love, a guide to intimate conversations and deeper relationships. Those questions, you may not be ready to ask someone else, to ask that other person on the other side of that table. But maybe, as we talked about, those questions can be the primers to help you explore your own thinking, to explore your own inner dimension of what you want from the relationship. And then when you're ready, it's to turn around and have that tough conversation. It's to sit in the silence, to get used to the discomfort, to find that equanimity. Because in that silence, maybe there is an answer to help you and that other person move forward in your relationship. Again, the quality of our lives Well, that's represented by the quality of our relationships. At least that's my take on it. And a personal thank you, Topaz. I'm very grateful and appreciative of our conversation today. I hope we have a second one at some point in the near future. So cheers for that. Well, folks, that brings us to the finishing line of yet another episode. If you think this could be of help to someone else, please share it. And please take a time to recommend and rate the show. Until Friday, keep well, keep strong, and we'll speak soon.